All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the stream. I hope everybody is doing well tonight. We are going to pick up where we left off last night, and we're going to continue sort of building out the world, building out some concepts, brainstorming some ideas, and figuring out what all we need to build in the game. So, before I jump into that, though, I do want to just take a quick second and thank the supporters of the channel, beginning with our elite partner, Javier Olazaran. That is the highest tier of subscription over there on YouTube memberships and Patreon. I'd also like to thank our partners listed here. That is the next tier of subscription over on YouTube memberships and Patreon. And I would also like to thank all of the supporters listed here under the supporter section. That is a combination of the other tiers of support over there on YouTube memberships, Patreon, as well as Twitch subscriptions. So thank you all very much for your support. I greatly appreciate it, and it's definitely going to help in the development of this game because I am going to need funds at some point. So your support there helps a lot. I don't have any sponsors aside from you guys, so it is greatly, greatly appreciated. And of course, I appreciate all of you guys, the viewers, whether you are coming at us live, either on the YouTube side or over there on the Twitch side, or if you're just catching the VOD after the fact. I appreciate you guys, each and every one of you, for being here. Without you guys, this project would not exist. So thank you guys very much for being here. All right. Thorgis, how's it going? Good to see you. Welcome back. So, I did a little bit of writing offline. And I've done a little bit of map work offline, as you can actually see here. I may have to actually move my big old head off the screen here, but we'll try and do this without doing that if I can manage it. Maybe if I scooch that up a little bit. Yeah, maybe I should just switch sides with these two things. Let's do that. We'll put the map over here. And we'll put text over here, and I'll just adjust this so that it stops where I am on the screen. I guess we'll do that for now. Maybe it'll be easier to just switch back and forth. But all right, Apotham, good to see you as well. Welcome. Okay, so it looks like we're live and good across the board. So let's pick up where we left off last time. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the world building that I've done off camera because I wanted to kind of flesh out some of these ideas and I wanted to write some of the stuff down while I still had it fresh in my noggin. So I've done a bunch of that and I quickly built out just a rough world map here so that we have some sort of visual to piece all of this together, right? So we started talking about the world setting a little bit last night. We kind of came up with some loose ideas about this is how many cities we want to have, this is how many towns we want to have, this is how many settlements we want to have, that kind of thing. This is how many continents we're going to have, right? So we have all of that listed here. I've detailed out some various information here having to do with the world itself and its inhabitants. So you'll notice a lot of things aren't named here, but the names that are here do correspond with what I have in this document for now. And so as we think of names for things, I'll go ahead and update it in both places. So we our world setting, just as a reminder, it's a fantasy setting in a world that ranges from bright and beautiful landscapes to dark, twisting chasms. And it's a land steeped in ancient magic and lost secrets. So there's definitely going to be, a rich history behind this, multiple layers or levels of civilizations that have come and gone, things like that. So the first thing that I guess we can talk about, we do have races defined in here. So we do have three at the moment, three main races of folks here. So we have humans, who are the newest race to the world, and their origins are relatively unknown. So there's not a whole lot known to where they came from, how they got to be where they are, etc. It wasn't really documented, but they are known to be relatively new compared to the other two. And so we'll touch on the sort of main the main categories first that are like this, and then we'll dive into the sort of subsects of each one. So we have humans, we have trolls. Trolls basically are another race of beings here who live in various parts of the world. They've been around for a very, very long time, and they are openly hostile towards humans. And we'll get into the reasoning behind that. And then we also have dwarves, who are technically the oldest race here of all of them, because they are descendants of the Titans. And so that is, let me move this over a little bit because it looks like there's some text cut off there. So they are direct descendants of the Titans, who were the ones who constructed the world to begin with, right? And so we don't mention the Titans here, only because Titans are part of Dwarven history, and there aren't any Titans left alive. So while there may be references in stories and architecture and things like that, the race itself is not around anymore. So within each of these, we have sort of subsections or subsects of each individual race, and there's different numbers per race, right? For humans, there's 3. So we have what we're calling right now the northern humans, and anywhere you see these brackets like this, that means it is a placeholder name. So you'll see along with like City C, Zone G, Zone H, those are all placeholders. And the reason I did it that way is because it'll be easy to find and replace in this document when we come up with a name. So we have northern humans. So they were adapted to live in extremely cold environments. So they're much, much larger than your average size human, much stronger than your average size human, and much, able to take much more of a beating, as it were. And so these tend to follow the beliefs of the old gods. They reject modern technology and the newfound arcane arts. Arcane is going to be something we're going to talk about in a bit. These guys believe that might is everything, physical might, and are super fierce combatants in battle, but they do not use any sort of magic whatsoever. They believe in physical might only. And so unlike other humans, these keep mostly to themselves. So they're not out to conquer the world. They're not out to really barter or trade with much of anybody else. They just kind of are self-sufficient and keep to themselves. Then we have what we're calling for now the central humans. And they live in the warmer climates, in the center of continent A. So this is continent A over here on the left. And they live basically in this area and in the surroundings, right? And so they basically have an average size, an average build. They believe in leveraging anything that gives them any kind of an edge or an advantage when it comes to arcane or technology or anything else. And then they are also known as conquerors around the world and typically have super elite armed forces that are difficult to fight off under balanced scenarios. Balanced being important here, because there are places where they can be overthrown. They fiercely detest trolls of any kind, and are generally disliked by other races in return, mostly by trolls, right? And then we have the Far Eastern humans. So they live in continent B. Continent B is this guy down here, right? Including these islands down here. This is continent B. And so they believe in upholding like ancient traditions and beliefs by weaving it into every aspect of their lives. So they, in general, for the most part, they reject newer technology. And technology, we're going to have to come up with a name for that too. That'll be something we'll discuss here in a minute. In favor of maintaining strict daily training regimens and strong focus on the soul as a core of strength to enhance their abilities. So they very much are in tune with their soul and using that as a balance to enhance their physical fighting capabilities. And they do also use magic to some extent, and we'll kind of get into that as well. So those are the sort of three subsects of humans that we have, or at least the major ones. We'll have some other minor ones that pop up around the world in different places, but that's basically that. And then for trolls, we have two types of trolls. So Troll A and Troll B. Again, these are placeholder names. We'll have to come up with names for this stuff. These trolls live in the deserts in the southern territories of continent A. This should actually say the jungle and deserts in the southern territories of continent A. So that is basically this zone B and zone C, as well as zone D, right? So they basically occupy this whole area. And so this one here is basically jungle. This here is desert, and then we've got a little bit more jungle off to the side here where it's closer to the water. And so they're openly hostile towards humans due to the conquering of their old capital by Central Humans, and we'll get into that actually. So City A is basically now built on their old capital. So where City A sits used to be a troll capital, right? There used to be their capital city here, and City A is now sitting on top of that. And so they now live in City B, which is a little bit further to the south. And we'll get into the reasons behind that conflict in a bit. And so although other types of humans, aside from the central ones that live in this area, had nothing to do with the conquest, trolls of City B basically despise any and all humans as a result. And they're neutral with the third race, which is dwarves. So we'll get into that in a bit. And then Troll B are completely different, right? They're a peaceful tribal subsect of trolls living in the jungles along the west coast and adjacent islands off the coast of continent B. So basically they are living in here, right? And I guess I'll probably add a few islands here, but this is basically where they live, right? And I'm thinking even maybe overextending into the desert in here a little bit. So, these trolls pretty much despise the way that the trolls in or in City B, right? The first kind of trolls, they despise how they live. They prefer non-violence as a way of life. They're completely opposite, right? This doesn't mean that they're weak, and they'll use their own form of, spiritual bond with the environment to enhance their powers in a shamanistic way, right? So they're shamans essentially. They're pacifists when possible, but they will fight if needed. And then we have dwarves, which is the final of the major three races, at least for now. We may add to that later. So we've got two kinds of dwarves. And so Dwarf A is basically scattered out through the forests of continent A. So these guys live within all of these forested areas here, in all three of these zones. And they're just kind of scattered, and we'll get to why that is in a bit. They are super violent and murderous due to their beliefs. They believe that other forms of the arcane, which again, we'll talk about the arcane, are just magic tricks and generally fall short to the might offered by their own weapons. So they believe that arcane version D is depleted, and we'll talk about that again here in a minute, with the only remaining remnants used to enchant their weapons. These weapon enchants are enhanced by direct contact with the blood of their enemies, and must be recharged somewhat regularly, meaning they basically have to kill people in order to maintain their strength, or at least that's what they believe. And so the enchantments grant a great amount of resilience as well as physical strength to the wielder via the weapon, which grows with each kill that you get with the weapon. However, they do not attack each other, as Dwarf A blood or Dwarf B blood dampens the arcane effect, right? So these dwarves are extremely hungry for this power, and as a result, they resort to terrorizing the local populations for their own gains in this regard. Their weapons are the most prized possession, prioritized even above saving their own brethren in battle. Their internal struggle among themselves keeps them from amassing any real form of power or organization. So that's why they're split all over the place, right? Because they basically can't get along with one another because they're always in contest with one another. And then we have Dwarf B. And so these are, again, very different to the Dwarf A, such as the that Troll B is different from Troll A. So these guys are relatively peaceful, and they're oftentimes mistaken for their more violent brethren. So people tend to fear them because of the way that the dwarf A acts, right? So these guys reside in the mountain ranges of continent B and devote their lives to mining the resources there. So they actually live up here, is where their home is. All right. So we have the multiple continents. We've already kind of talked about that. So I'm going to skip over this for a second because I've actually gone in here and gone into detail on each continent, zones within, cities within, things like that. So I'm going to skip that for a second and come back to it. So there's continent B, continent C. Here's our oceans, right? That's pretty self-explanatory. Not really a whole lot to go into on that. We have Ocean A, which is between these two, Ocean B, which is over to this way, and Ocean C, which is over this way. And this leaves it open. If I want to add another continent, I could do that. Or if not, these two will just meet in the middle somewhere. All right. So we have a couple of different concepts. We have a concept of different religions in here that some of these groups follow. So we have that, and then we also have the concept of arcane. And so those two things are very tightly integrated in this game. So the various religions basically have different beliefs about the way that arcane works, and they all call it different things. They access it in different ways, but ultimately they're all using the same thing, but they highly disagree with one another on how it works, how it should work, and so forth. So we'll get into those details in just a second. Before we jump into that, though, let me just catch up on YouTube chat here real quick. Roman General, good to see you. Kakali, good to see you as well. Let's see. Would be great if you would add a drag and drop visual editor with dock spacing and Kohi. We'll be doing that at some point because we're going to build out a full-fledged editor at some point. Evelyn, how's it going? Good to see you. Welcome. Okay, so I'll try and make this somewhat brief. I guess we can touch on. Let's touch on the religion first, and then come back to the arcane, right? Because the arcane is then kind of based around the religion aspect, right? So religion A believes in arcane form A, right? So there's religion A, and then there's various forms of arcane. So if we look at the arcane section, we have arcane A, B, C, D, and I think, yeah, there's an E in here as well. So there's all these various versions of the arcane, but essentially they all under the hood are the same thing. It's just these different folks from these different religions found it in different ways and access it in different ways. And so religion A is primarily practiced by humans. So it revolves around the teachings of a prophet that existed about 100 years ago who discovered the use of arcane A through means of reagents gathered through from various places around the world. So this is like various various herbs or stones or things like that. Maybe the blood of a crocodile or something like that. Putting things like that together in such a way where it actually accesses the arcane, right? And so followers of this have disdain for followers of any other religion, believing theirs is the one true religion and the others to be inferior. They basically label everybody else that believes differently from them as heretics, and those heretics are often forced into hard labor, to repent or put to death if they refuse to repent. Ironically, they review religion C as barbaric, religion B as primitive and inferior. So we'll go into those. Religion B believes in arcane form B. So this is practiced by the monks of Zone K, so that is down here, right? So those are the sort of Far Eastern humans. And this religion focuses not on multiple or even a single god, but rather one spiritual bond with the world itself. By the power of inward focus and rigid training comes both the ultimate mental and physical strength. These monks are relatively few in number, and seek peace over violence, but they're fiercest warriors on the planet. They are the fiercest warriors on the planet and not to be trifled with. So while some of these other guys, these guys have like elite armies and stuff, these guys are actually much, much stronger than them and can take on several of these guys at once. But there's not a whole lot of them, right? And so, let's see. Where were we? They don't care about the existence of other religions. They only care about spreading the knowledge of their own religion to those willing to hear it, so they don't force it on anybody. Most of the followers of this reject modern technology of any kind, right? So they very much believe in spirituality with the planet and their self, and appreciating the environment, things like that, which tends to go against newer technology. And then we have Religion C, which believes in arcane version C. So that's driven primarily by the fear of old gods. And followers in this ancient and, in fact, the oldest world in the world religion practice through prayer to the old gods and believe that certain among them are chosen and granted gifts of the old gods. They believe in regular sacrifices to the old gods for the appeasement of them. And so they generally use people that are injured or have infirmities or mental disabilities, things like that, as their sacrifices. They believe that overuse or misuse of arcane leads to madness and will wilt and even destroy the world around them if used faster than the energies can recoup. They view Religion A as overblown and playing with trinkets and baubles, and Religion B as blasphemous, right? So the interesting thing is these guys are super violent, and these guys are as well, but they say, well, this Religion C is super barbaric compared to us. Which is ironic because they both are. And so arcane is basically the underlying ability to channel energies from life forces within the world, right? Which we don't have a name for these two things yet. We'll come up with that. It's known by various names, and is channeled by various practices around the world, with each being ignorant of the other's workings and writing them off in one way or another, when really it is all the same underlying thing. So, if these guys would basically sit down and have a chat and talk to one another, they would realize that they're all basically doing the same thing. So, we already kind of covered this. Arcane A is the name for arcane by followers of Religion A. Same for B, same for C. Arcane D is the name for arcane by the dwarves of Continent A and Continent B, although its use and consequences therein differ between the two. It's believed by both that Arcane D was left over during the construction of the world by the ancient titans from whom the dwarves evolved, right? So these guys basically don't tie the use of the arcane to any religion. They're agnostic, right? They just believe that it was leftovers from when the world was created, right? And so the dwarf A's believe that it's a resource to be treasured, as all existence of it has already been used up or essentially run out. So they don't believe that there's any more left in the world. They believe that it's already been used. The only traces of it to their belief is in their crude but enchanted axes, which are enchanted with Arcane D, right? So that's what we're talking about here. So long ago, they got axes that were enchanted with arcane, and they believe there's no more arcane, and that the only arcane left is actually within the enchantments on their weapons, right? So again, they're granted strength by felling their enemies with the weapons, as the blood from those enemies enhances the power of the weapons in their wielder. As a result, these weapons are the most prized possession of any dwarf and are prioritized over even saving their brethren in battle, right? We already kind of went over that. And then Dwarf B, these guys believe that it's naturally occurring and is released into the air during mining operations. So these dwarves live in the mountainous regions of Continent B, so that's up here. And they focus their lives mining to constantly have a supply of this resource. To them, the strongest versions of it are harvested through unique and rare stones. They believe that this power should be shared by all. So they're not just out for themselves. They believe in sharing it amongst themselves as well as anybody that comes in and visits them. And then there's also the last version of this, which is Arcane E, which powers the technology we talked about, which is basically high-tech gadgets, weaponry, general lifestyle improvements, ultimately powered by a form of Arcane known as Arcane E. So it's harvested from machines, or harvested via machines, from the surrounding environment, as well as harvested in foreign land and piped in, right? And this actually will come back at some point in the story. The strong hold of this is in Zone L, City D. So that is down here, right? All of these guys. So this is basically the technology capital of the world here. This is where you're going to find all the latest, greatest stuff, all the really cool tech gadgets and things like that. And some of that has made its way into the world around, but much of the rest of the world rejects it, right? All right. Every religion but my own is wrong mentality. Yes, that's exactly it. 2 of them are that way. And the third one just doesn't care. Where can I find this doc? So it's private right now while we're building it out. I don't know. This is probably, this document is just here to kind of get us started to brainstorm. It's, I don't know if I'll ever wind up releasing it because it's really just a place to jot down ideas. But clearly your heart is in this concept. Good. Yes, I'm really liking this idea. The more that I think about it and develop the story and whatnot, I'm really liking it. It looks like the Earth is flat in this story. Yeah, well, the map is flat, right? But yeah, I'm thinking, the way that I'm thinking about it is Ocean B and C can either be connected, or if I wanted to, in like maybe a DLC, if I decide to do that at some point, or an expansion, I could add another continent like over here somewhere, and still have that separation. That's why I didn't just say Ocean B continues over here, because that would lock me in. So yeah, I mean, you can sail around the world and wind up over here, but yeah. Solid lore drop. I like it. Awesome. I'm glad you do. Yeah, that's, I've really actually kind of gotten into this a little bit. So, it's really been a lot of fun. Hypnotic Games, thank you for the posture check. I appreciate that. How have you been, by the way? What are you up to? All right. So, let's jump back into this. Okay, so I think we should probably talk about wars, right? Because this is significant events. I started thinking about significant events that affected things the way they are. And there's a reason we haven't really talked about up here yet. So there were 3 wars, 3 big wars, right? Lots of little conflicts have happened in between that, and we'll flush that out at some point. But my main thing is, in the past, there were 3 wars, right? So there was War A, and again, we don't have names for these things yet. So it's a fierce and costly battle between 2 opposing sects of humans within the capital of Dawnvale, over strong disagreements within the government between Religion A and Religion C. Remember, those are the 2 that butt heads, right? It spiraled out of control, plunged the area into an all-out civil war. Tens of thousands died. The city area and the area surrounding it was destroyed and corrupted into what is now known as Duskvale. So Duskvale is up here. It was known as Dawnvale and is now destroyed and is called Duskvale. And so during all of this, word spread that the trolls of Type A took the disaster as an opportunity to try and wipe humans from the planet entirely, killing many more than originally thought. That will come back in a minute. So War B is post-War A. The humans came together, and the survivors of this came together and vowed to essentially never fight each other once again, ever again. And so in retaliation for what they believe happened up here, the humans sailed west to continent B, landing in town E. So that's up here, right? So they sailed from here over to here. And then they marched south to City A, right? And they took the old troll city that was there. City of A Old is what I'm calling it right now, because I don't have a name for that previous city. But it stood where City A sits right now. Mostly destroying it and building City A on top of it. So humans thought nothing of it for a while, where there was relative peace in the region. A little while afterwards, War C broke out. So in retaliation for War B, Troll A viciously attacked City A, but were ultimately unsuccessful in doing so. After a few years of skirmishing along the border of Zone A and Zone B, so that's going to be this line right here, where that is, a ceasefire was called by both sides due to mounting losses, but no peace agreement was ever reached. That's a super important part. So a border was established, guarded heavily on both sides, and a tense standoff has been in place ever since. Technically, War C never ended, so it's still technically ongoing. And that is the reason for the highlighting of the city names, right? So City A is obviously friendly because that's where we are going to begin our story. City B, at least at the beginning, is going to be hostile, right? So it is in red. If you go into this area, you're going to have a bad time, right? And then City D obviously is friendly as well, and City C is neutral, right? So it's yellow. There's also a note in here that says it eventually comes to light that it was a treasonous Troll A that spread the rumor that sparked War B as an attempt to weaken the inner Troll A ruling party in a failed attempt to overthrow the government, essentially. Neither side knew about this at the time, and Troll A had no idea why they were attacked in the first place. That's why they got mad and retaliated here. So you had both of these sides fighting each other over something that basically never actually even happened, which is, I think, kind of an interesting development. So that is basically the history of the wars, at least that I've gotten up to at this point. Koei Impact. That's very funny singing. Yeah, I don't know about that. I still don't have a name for it, right? I don't even have a name for like a lot of the cities and stuff, so we've got to figure that out. Okay, so that is that, and then the last thing is I wrote up a little bit of detail about the continents and some of the cities and zones themselves, just to give you guys a little bit of like what the world looks like, so that we can build on top of it. So continent A is situated to the west as you look at the map. This continent is vast and diverse, from the bitter cold regions in the north to the balmy and eventually steamy central territories, all the way to the desert in the south, right? So that is this guy. You know, you've got the cold up here, like a temperate climate here, kind of a warm average climate here, and then we've got like the hot jungle here, and then of course we've got desert here, with a little bit more jungle off to the side, right? And so within this continent, we have Zone A, which is like the quintessential human territory with lush green forests, clear lakes, rocky hillsides, with mines that are rich in resources, right? It's kind of the thing you think about when you think of like a human settling area, right? It contains paved roads throughout the zone, making travel between the towns easy. It's one of the 3 large cities. Actually, this should be 4 large cities because I did expand that. One of the 4 large cities, City A, is nestled here, connecting the ocean to the other side. I didn't actually wind up doing that part, so I'm actually just going to say it's nestled here within, or I should say, I guess, around the bay on the eastern coast. All right. When I was initially thinking about this, I didn't have this map. I actually wound up making this map because I was having a little bit of trouble visualizing all of it in my head without having something visual, right? So the mountains surrounding it provide a natural defensive barrier to intruders. So there's you can't see it here because I didn't quite have enough room, but there's going to be some mountains, like a mountain range that maybe extends around here, right? And then let's see. The zone itself stretches the span of the continent from the east to the west coast. It's connected to Zone E via something that I've named the Autumn Reach because I thought that name was kind of cool. So there's going to be essentially a small section here that essentially eternally looks like autumn, connecting these two zones, right? And I'm thinking of having it go all the way up here. And it'll basically be the path along the road, right? Because otherwise, this is sort of like a highland kind of area that exists. That's typically next to a cold zone without actually being super cold. So City A is contained within Zone A and is primarily occupied by humans, although peaceful denizens of other races are welcomed. So that's a bit of an important thing there. We'll have a little bit of variety there. One side leans out to Zone A, with the other being connected to Ocean A, right? So you can go out the back to Zone A, or you can go straight to the ocean, right? We've got the ship there. It's got a huge pier, a dock, all that stuff. It wraps around a large bay, making it a large port city. And then we also have something called Town A, which is situated in Zone A, and that's where most of the farmers live outside city limits. It's located just before the entrance to Zone E. So that is this guy up here, right? So that's just going to be a little bit of a farming town, kind of out away from the city, but supporting the city and connected to it via road, right? So there's that. And then Zone B is like a dense. I initially had this as a. No, it is still okay. It's a dense jungle containing dangers of all sorts. It's always extremely humid and hot, as you would expect. And the border between this and Zone A are contested heavily guarded on both sides. So basically, there's a huge fence along here, or what's the word for those barricades? A bunch of barricades, with military forces on both sides. And then we have City B, which is the oldest city in the world. Even though the dwarves are older, the City B is actually going to be the oldest city in the world. And it actually spans across Zone B and C. So it kind of sits in the middle of these two zones, right? So it's got jungle on one side and desert on the other. It's occupied by Troll A and is openly hostile towards all humans due to the conquering of its old capital. We already went into all that, right? So we have that. Zone C is basically an arid stretch of desert that resides south of City B, again, stretching from coast to coast. This is deep troll territory and is not contested, right? So it's definitely, we could even highlight it red if we wanted to. Many ancient secrets are buried beneath the sands there. So this zone is actually going to be important, more so than just being an empty, open desert, right? And then Zone D is this small peninsula jutting out from the southwest corner of the continent. And it includes the islands dotting its coast. So like all these little islands here. And so this is still technically troll territory, but it's the home to Town B, which is generally considered neutral, as it serves as a trade hub for the trolls. So the trolls can't necessarily survive on their own. They have to trade with other cities. And so they basically use this all the way out as far as they can get away from their home base to trade with everybody else, and it's heavily guarded, right? So they begrudgingly allow foreigners there under heavy watch due to the necessity of trade. So Town B is nestled there across the southernmost tip of the peninsula and the adjacent island. So there's an island here, and then the peninsula's here, and the town basically stretches across that. And let's see. Where did I? Yeah, I think we already covered all of that. All right, so Zone E, and I realize these aren't 100% in order, but Zone E is actually up here. This is just kind of the way I was thinking about them, the order, and I didn't want to change it. So it's a temperate climated area located just to the north of Zone A. Part of a trade route between the northern humans and central humans. So even though these guys up here are sort of keep to themselves, they do have trade routes open because, again, necessary for economy, right? So this area is also widely used for agricultural purposes and has a relatively low population. So there'll be other farming and small towns that pop up in here. And then it's connected to Zone A, again, via the Autumn Reach. So that's going to be like right in here somewhere. And then we have Zone F, which is like the bitter cold zone, right? So it's a mountainous region that's lived in by the barbaric northern humans. Most of this area is completely uninhabited, outside of a few small settlements and one port town. That port town being this guy over here. So that's Town E, right? It's a medium-sized port town in Zone F, occupied by northern humans. They are tolerant of other humans, although they look down on them as puny and feel sorry for them for being so small. But generally intolerant of other outsiders, generally not allowing them within the city without agreements across their local council, right? So they're definitely, they believe in their own ways, they believe in the ancient ways, and they're very hard-headed. Surprise, surprise. And so that pretty much does it for Continent A. So let me catch up on chat really quickly before I move on to Continent B. Sukelos Music, good to see you. How are you doing? I owe you some design stuff. I'll collect it and send it over soon. Awesome. That sounds great. I appreciate that. Amazing how far you took the idea in a day. Yeah, I really did a lot of thinking on this. And honestly, this is only between last night and maybe a half an hour at lunchtime today, and then maybe another hour and a half is how I got this far. So it definitely was just kind of like rolling off my mind as I went. You know, it just kind of kept going and going and going. Okay, cool. So Continent B, it's located on the eastern side of the map. So that is this guy here. And so it doesn't reach as far north as Continent A does, but it does reach slightly farther south. I did run out of room here on this particular map builder, but my plan is to actually have it go down to like here, right? So we'll probably wind up, reformatting this a little bit. So the northern reaches are a mountainous tundra with which cascades down into the vast plains towards the center. So we've got this mountainous tundra up here. That's where the other type of dwarves live. And then we have this sort of large, open, gentle hill, rolling hills, grasslands, right? That exist in this area. And there'll be some settlements in here for sure. Farms and things like that. And then, Kuju just raided with a party of 43 viewers. Thank you so much for the raid, Kuju. How are you doing? For those of you who don't know who Kuju is, he is working on a game called Fat Goblins, written in Jai, which is absolutely phenomenal looking. You guys should definitely go check out his channel and give him a follow for sure. Another miserable fluid simulation thing today that doesn't work. What are you working on today? I understand your frustration with that, for sure. First off, thank you so much for the raid. Welcome, raiders. So we have actually switched gears completely, and we are in game design mode right now. So we're not actually writing any code today. We're going over... we started on this design yesterday. I did a little bit more design work off camera. Including writing up some details about this world map that I've created here, and thus the creation of the world map itself, so that we can build a game on top of this. Because my idea is that we build the world first, and then start to build the stories on top of that. And so the idea that we're building here is we're going to build a... how did I word this at the top? It's a top-down 3D isometric perspective action RPG. I need to shorten that a little bit, but that's basically what it is. So it's going to be open world, but zoned. It's going to encourage exploration, but not too linearly in terms of the storyline and how you explore, with multiple endings based on actions and choices you make along the way. And so what I've done is I've basically created an outline here that has a bunch of different things in it. You'll notice that a lot of this stuff doesn't have names yet. So I'm just kind of now like banging out these ideas while they're coming to mind, and then we'll come up with some names afterwards. But we've got some races in here. So we have humans, trolls, and then dwarves, and we've got subsects within each one of those, right? So there's 3 different types of humans, there's 2 different types of trolls, and 2 different types of dwarves. We have multiple continents. We've got 3 continents, each with their own unique places and whatnot within them, and stories behind them. And so those, of course, have cities and towns and little settlements, large landmarks, things like that. So we've just been kind of going through the description that I wrote up offline, and we've actually made it through most of it. There's just a couple more things we have to do. So we have that, and then we also dived into the creation of some other concepts that sort of support this. So we kind of have a little bit of a story behind various religions in the game that are sort of vying for power against one another, and then how that intertwines with the use of what's called arcane, at least for now. So everything in here with these square brackets around it has yet to actually be named. But like world, we don't have a name for the world yet, or arcane. It's like their type of magic, but we don't have like an actual name for it yet. And so basically this arcane is known as different things. It's called as different things by different groups of people around the world. And it's invoked in different ways, right? Some use reagents in order to invoke it. Some of them, use the environment around them and believe that and their spiritual link with it, is what does it. The dwarves believe, or some of the dwarves, anyways, believe that it's achieved and released through mining. And then there's another sector of dwarves that are murderous little shits, basically, is what I call them. And they believe that they achieve arcane power via killing others, right? And so there's lots of different interpretations of what the arcane is, how it's used, how it's invoked, and the benefits and drawbacks to that. And you have all of these different religious and political forces battling back and forth against one another, trying to say, hey, we're the top dog. And then there's, of course, another religion in the middle that's just sort of like, hey, we don't care about you guys. If you want to listen to what we have to say, great. If you don't, who cares? Just go do your thing. And so that's kind of the world that we're building right now. And then we also have another version of the arcane that powers somewhat modern technology, which we also don't have a name for. And so that's just another form of the arcane, and that is down here. And so this is going to be like the ultra realistic or futuristic type of technology with super modern inventions that are like quality of life enhancements and weaponry and things like that. Travel, things like that, that many other places of the world actually reject. And so it's about that power struggle between that and the religions and the various forms of arcane. And then, of course, the sects that don't believe in using arcane or technology and just believe that physical might is the way to success. And so we're just kind of building out that world. We've already defined some wars that have happened, too, that have changed the landscape to what it is when we enter the game. I know that's kind of a long-winded introduction, but that is basically what we're doing. And so we've already kind of gone through this continent. Just to sort of briefly recap, we have the humans that live here in City A. City A is built on top of old troll ruins of a city that was conquered by the humans. We have City B down here, which is a troll city. So the humans and trolls are at war because of what happened here. We have a city here that we haven't really talked about yet. We are going to be getting to this. This one's owned by the dwarves, so we'll talk about this in a little bit. And then, of course, we have the ultra-futuristic city here. And then we have... I actually do have names for these places up here. We have this place called Duskvale, which is the name of a destroyed city and outer area around that city that was destroyed and had its land corrupted and all that stuff from an internal civil war that broke out over religion. And so that basically drove the surviving humans out of that area. They sailed over here to Town E, marched through or Zone F through Zone E, and attacked the city that was here, the Troll City, and then built their own city on top of it. And the reason they did that is because somebody had convinced them that during this civil war, a bunch of trolls went up there and killed a whole bunch more humans than was initially thought, which didn't actually happen. It was a rumor. But it sparked another war, or another two wars. So it sparked a war of the humans going over here and attacking this city, and then it triggered the trolls coming back and trying to take back City A, but failing. And then having basically a DMZ border along here where, there's military on both sides of it, and they're technically at war still. They're at a ceasefire, but the war never technically ended. So that is more or less what it is. And it's an interesting. I think it's interesting, anyways. Basically, what happened here was when this fell, a literal troll from City B spread rumors that the trolls from City B had actually gone in there and attacked and killed a whole bunch of humans, which pissed them off. And they basically said, well, we're not going to fight each other anymore. Let's go fight these trolls and make ourselves a new city, because this land is basically wasted. It's lost. So they did that, not knowing that it was just a false rumor. And then City B down here has no idea why the humans actually attacked City A initially to take it over. They have no idea why it happened. They didn't see it coming. And so that's why they lost the city right away. And so all of that will come to light eventually, but basically what the guy that spread the rumors, or the troll that spread the rumors about what happened here, was trying to cause chaos within the government here to overthrow it so he could take power. So, it's kind of a multiple power struggles going on at once. Soul foam, yes. I mean, in a way, that's kind of what it is, yeah. But there's even, there's even sects of the different races that are battling against each other that can't stand one another. So there's two different types of trolls. The two different types of trolls can't stand one another. And then the two different types of dwarves can't stand one another either. All right. So thank you for the follow, by the way. All right. So let's see. Let me just make the rest of my way through Continent B, and then we'll talk about Continent C, which is really small. It'll be pretty quick to get through. Okay, so we already talked about Zone G, which is sort of this highland area where City C resides, right? So City C, which we haven't talked about yet, is a vast underground city with sprawling twists and turns connecting large hollowed-out sections of the earth. So essentially what the dwarves did was, instead of building on top of the land here, which is very mountainous, uneven territory, they dug deep down below the surface and carved out huge areas, and they built their city underneath the ground, far underneath the ground. And so that is what City C is that. And then Town C, which is over here, that is basically a coastal town that is located on the beaches of Continent B, directly west of City C. So that's what puts that here. The town is owned and occupied by Central Humans, right? So the same guys that are over here own this little section of land and the surrounding, right? Although it remains neutral in standing with all other nations. So this is one of the neutral towns that basically says, if you come here, don't fight each other. We are neutral. We don't want any part of any war or conflict whatsoever. So that is Town C, and Town B is very much the same way, although the trolls do guard this one a little bit more, a little bit more tightly, I guess is the word I need. So it's a primary trade hub across the world, often used for trade among warring nations because it's neutral, right? So trolls from City B can ship stuff to there and sell them to the humans of City A through Town C, right? which is nice and far away from those two and whatnot. Then we have Zone H, which is a zone of midland plains. So that is this guy right here. So that's got just the rolling hills and flat grassland, right? Plains just wide open. And so there's not, it says much of the land is open, relatively flat grasslands with the occasional forest dotting the landscape. There'll be some farming settlements there, but that's about it, right? It's not going to be very densely populated. It's mostly going to be wildlife and stuff that's going to be there. And then situated along the western coast of Continent B is Zone I. So that is this guy, right? So that's both parts of this. You'll see here that there's a river here, and we'll get into that in a minute. But this is essentially jungle again, which was largely abandoned by trolls after a storm wiped most of it out. So basically a hurricane came through and just knocked a lot of it out, right? And then just go, we're not going to rebuild this. We're just going to go back home. So most of the roads that once existed are overgrown. Bridges long collapsed. Buildings are nothing more than ruins. The bottommost portion is split off by a river passing through from the east, right? So that's this river here. So that river basically cuts all the way across. Zone J is located in the middle bottom portion of the continent. So that's this guy. It's largely uninhabited because it's hot, arid climate, right? Barring a small sect of humans who live there and survive as nomads. It too is split by that river. Land has an almost red hue to it from the clay, which shapes most of the terrain there. So that's what that is. We may have a couple small settlements in there. We've got one. And then another one here down by the coast. We may add stuff to that at some point. We'll see. And then we have Zone K, which is a little bit more interesting. So this is basically a large sprawling plateau that's very high up. That spreads from the edge of the desert to the west to the coast to the east, dropping down to the ocean near the very edge, right? So it's a cliff, essentially, that drops down here. This zone is a temperate climate that has hot summers and cold winters. People of all races and backgrounds live here, many of whom converted from another religions or were outcast from their homelands. So this is not particular to any race or religion. Well, it is particular to a religion. We'll get to that in a second. But people of all races and backgrounds have come to live here. So there's quite a mix of folks there. Town D is located there, right? So that's just a smaller town. And it's the spiritual haven of those who practice, what was it? I think it was Religion B. It somehow got cut off. I think it was Religion B. Let me fill that in. So we got to come up with names for this stuff to make it a little bit more cohesive, right? But at least we have it mapped out that way. And finally, we have Zone L. So this is consisting of a few large islands with a few small ones, and is an interesting juxtaposition of ancient structures and shrines celebrating Religion B, and extremely modern and advanced technology generally rejected by the followers of Religion B. So while the two sects of this religion disagree in principle, they coexist in peace and do trade with one another as needed. Zone L contains settlements and towns, and indeed a city with the most advanced technology in the world, powered by technology / Arcane E. So City D is the city of technology. It resides on a relatively small piece of land. Instead of going outward like most of the other cities do, this one has the technology to go upward. So the city, everything goes upwards in that city. So it's very, very different from any of the other cities around the world. All the latest, greatest inventions and wonders of the world, often beyond the wildest imagination of peasants in other parts of the world, came from here. Generally admired by most of the world, but lamented by those with an understanding of where its power comes from. So that alludes back to this imports power. Both it gets it locally, but also imports it from other regions, right? And so that's going to be a source of contention at some point, because the power is essentially draining on the life force of the planet because they're using it at such a fast rate, right? And then we have Town F, which is located at the northernmost island of Zone L. This small town is home to those looking to escape the hustle of City D. So that's here. And finally, we have Continent C. So this is definitely by far the smallest of the continents. It's located to the north and divided into just 2 zones, with the first occupying most of the continent's territory. So Dusk Vale is the one of the few named places, right? That's this. We've talked about that with the war. So basically, this is it's a zone surrounded by mountains, which form a ring-shaped barrier around its circumference. Most of its land sits below the mountain range, in the middle, hence the term Vale, portion of the name, which translates loosely to valley in the local language. And so this area was decimated by War A, and it was known as the former capital city of Dawn Vale, right? So Dawn Vale became Dusk Vale when it was destroyed. City and its surroundings laid to waste, with the city center being replaced by a very large crater, which I don't have the thing to draw on here yet, but that's what it essentially is. Now corrupted by foul magic from the aftermath of this war, it is forever eclipsed in eternal twilight. So that's the other thing, is it's always nighttime here. And then the souls who wander here are thought to be lost beyond recognition or help, and extremely hostile and dangerous to any outsider. So basically, anybody that didn't escape got corrupted by the dark forces that were there, and are now extremely dangerous. And basically, the rest of the world just avoids this place, right? It's all kind of contained in this mountain range, so that they can't really leave. And even indeed getting in there is a little bit difficult. You have to go through Umbrathar, right? And eventually we'll flesh that out as well. But that's basically the idea. Few who trek here from the outside come back alive. It's basically the overall idea there. We've talked about Dawn Vale and what that was. That was a former human capital city located there, which was destroyed as a result of War A. It and the surrounding areas are collectively known as Dusk Vale. And then Umbrathar is the last location. So it's a small peninsula off to the west of Dusk Vale, which remains relatively unscathed from the fallout of War A due to the mountain range that separates it from the rest of the continent. So this mountain range right here basically spared this section. It's permanently enshrouded in dense fog that never lifts, however. It's been this way since the war. So basically there's a dense fog that's set in here, and it never, ever goes away. And so the few who either escaped Dusk Vale before its end, or were away when it happened, are the only inhabitants of Umbrathar, aside from the folks that left for this. And they are basically fiercely clutching onto it as the last remnant of their homeland, right? So the people that are here did not want to go over to City A because they're like, no, this is my home. This place is my home, and I'm going to find a way to fix it. So that's essentially what they're thinking there. The inhabitants here have mostly denounced any form of religion, citing it as the cause for War A, which it was. They have, however, heavily adopted technology to survive and defend their home against the spreading corruption. So they get a lot of their technology from down here, and they use that to keep out all the stuff going on here. And that is basically where we are at in terms of world building for now. So there's other things we have to fill in. There's other things that we have to define. But I wanted to kind of get a little bit of the world built, so that way we can start thinking about some of the things we want to add for exploration, how we want to navigate, and things like that. Thank you for the follow. Let's see. Hey, sorry, I hope you don't mind me asking, but if you were to submit a bunch of command buffers to a queue, are they always guaranteed to execute in the order they're submitted in? I wasn't sure, and I wanted to use events to keep things synced, but things seem to work fine even without them. Yes, so you can't guarantee the execution order within the command buffer, but one command buffer is indeed executed after another, if they're all submitted to one queue. So between command buffers, yes, but within the command buffer, no. Yep. no problem. All right. 3D RTS RPG. It's an RPG. Yep. I was going to ask where all the game engine stuff was, but this brainstorming and lore is really interesting too. Awesome. Yeah, so this is the game that we're going to build using the engine, right? The engine's far enough along, we can actually start this. So we did talk about, and I think actually at this point, I think I can put the map away. So I'm just going to move this back over here. We did talk about some of the features that we're going to need to add, some of the systems that we're going to that we're missing that we're going to have to add in, right? So we have a list of engine features needed in terms of performance, or in terms of importance, right? Or in order of importance. So the first thing we're going to need is an animation system. I'm going to start doing a little bit of research on that probably over the weekend. And that is going to be implemented very, very soon. I'm not looking for anything crazy complex, but we do need the ability for characters to run around the world. The first game idea I was thinking of making didn't require that, but this one's going to require it. So there's that. The next thing is we need to add billboards. That's going to be easy. That's just rendering a quad that faces the camera, right? So I'm not too worried about that one. But we need that for the particle system. So we're going to implement a particle system as well. And then we have a few different effects. Although I should probably change the order on these somewhat, because I just realized that these are kind of a little bit backwards. So blended materials is probably going to be the next thing we have to build a support for, and that's going to be for terrains directly, because that's the only thing that uses that right now. Terrains themselves are implemented and working, but that we don't have blended materials for them, right? So we did the refactor of the material system, and all we have to do is build back in blended materials, which was basically like our multi-material from before, or terrain material. So we're just going to make that a little bit more generic and get that added back in. It's probably going to have the same limitations as before, which is fine. So we want to add an outline effect for sort of that cartoony look. And so that's going to be using the depth normal technique, right? So looking at normals and the depth buffer and determining where those things differ wildly, and then essentially drawing a line there in the shader. Emissive and bloom need to be added too. Emissive is already 70% of the way in there already, so I don't think that's going to be a big deal. And bloom is not going to be too big of a deal either. Localization obviously can be done much later, but not too much later, right? So one of the things I've decided in this game is we want to have the ability to have multiple languages supported, right? And so localization, I'm going to build the game all in English first. And then if it makes sense to translate it in other languages, because it's going to be an RPG, so there's a crap ton of text, right? So if it makes sense, I will port it to other languages. But if it winds up being too much of a thing, then we'll have localization, just technically not use it. But I'm going to build it as if I'm going to localize it. That way, if I change my mind on that later, all we have to do is drop in the other languages. Day-night cycles are something we just need to add. Again, that's just automating what happens with a directional light and skyboxes, right? So that's not really a huge thing. That's really just a couple shaders and a little bit of C logic, and that's about it. And then we also do need to add point light shadows. So this probably ought to be moved up in priority now that I'm thinking about it. This probably should be there, right? In fact, it should probably be here. So point light, we have directional light shadows, right? So that's what our shadow maps are for there. But we don't have that for point lights. And we really do need that for point lights, because if we cast a fireball or something, I want there to be projected shadows that sort of flash around as that fireball is going, through the scene. So that's another thing there. But these drop in terms of complexity and amount of implementation needed as it goes down the list too. So it drops in importance and it drops in complexity. So the biggest, most complex thing is going to be this, which really isn't all that crazy. And then, the rest, particle system might get nuts, although I don't think I'm going to go too crazy on that either. I think I'm just going to support what I need, and that's it. All right, so those are the engine features that we need, and then we started talking a little bit about wanted combat mechanics and wanted world mechanics, right? And so I haven't had a whole lot of time to work on this section of it. I was mostly focused on world building and lore, in the hopes that that would sort of help round this out a little bit. So, is this text big enough for you guys, by the way? Do you want me to zoom it in? Like, is that a little bit better? I think I should still be able to scroll it, and my head is not going to block it. So maybe that's a little bit better and easier to read. Text looks fine. Okay, cool. All right. Okay, so we did a lot of just sort of jamming stuff in here, but we started to talk about actually controls last night. Somebody brought up controls last night. And it's like, well, we have two different types of controls that we need. We need a set of controls for combat and a set for world and roaming, right? And so my thought is, combat is really going to be a subcategory to world and roaming, right? It's really going to build on top of that, I think. And so, I'm not even thinking like, I don't even know if we're going to have like a phase where you're like in or out of combat, right? I don't know if that matters as much. Maybe we'll have that. Maybe we won't. I don't know. So the controls, there's a couple things I'm thinking. So we probably ought to think about, what types of things we want to be able to control in the world. And this is basically just things like player movement, interactivity, stuff like that. So player movement along terrain via, and I'm thinking WASD or gamepad, if supported, which actually that's something I need to add here too. This is super low priority, but I want to add gamepad support. I'm thinking just WASD is probably going to be sufficient for actual movement. And then I'm thinking player aim is controlled via mouse. And so basically wherever you mouse on the screen, that's where your character is going to look at. So essentially the character looks at the cursor position, right? Is what I'm thinking for that. And so gamepad, if supported, will be the gamepad's left joystick, if supported. Or gamepad's right joystick, if supported. Right. So the left joystick there would be used to move your character in various directions, and then the right joystick would be used to turn your player, right, and have them look in different directions. Bit easier now, and then again I struggle a fair bit with reading small text anyways. Press is pretty late. Yeah, that's true. I should have asked that question much sooner. You brought up input based on context. It could be a simple state that the player is currently in that dynamically changes based on entering, exiting combat, swimming, flying, whatever else is possible. Yes. And that's kind of what I'm thinking. How do I want to put this? So world roaming. / global control scheme. So we can put here this control scheme is the basic set of controls from which all other control types inherit. It is almost always active, right? And then in this case, we can say when in combat, and I guess we can put in combat in quotes because we don't know what that means yet. We haven't defined it. A set of additional buttons, controls that are activated when fighting. Now, here's the thing. When fighting, I don't know that combat should necessarily be ever turned off. Because we talked about having the capability of going around and breaking pots and stuff like that to get items, right? So you're going to need to swing your sword for that. Now, you could go the Final Fantasy VII Remake route, where it's a context-sensitive thing, and you walk up to something and you press X, I think it is, and then, you know, Cloud takes out his sword and breaks the thing, right? And so it's like a swing of the sword, but it's not a combat swing of the sword, right? And so we could do something like that, but I don't love it. It feels awkward to me. And so I feel like it would be much more smooth if you could just swing your sword at any time. And if there happens to be something breakable there, then cool. I think what also would be kind of funny to have would be is if you're in town and doing that, if people complain at you about it. You know what I mean? Like, if you're just like walking through town, like swinging your sword all over the place, you know, people yell at you and stuff. Say, hey, what are you doing? You don't do that inside the town. And then, you know, if you keep doing it, maybe the guards come after you or something. Switching on context is mostly for using the same key binding to conduct different actions. Yeah, so context-sensitive key bindings, right? But, like, the more I think about it, the more that I'm thinking that they don't actually need to be separate key bindings. Because, like, I'm looking at an actual Xbox 360 controller here, right? And so I'm thinking, if we have, like, these would be the movement, right? And then you've got 4 buttons over here, and you've got another 2 shoulder buttons and then 2 triggers. And then you also have the D-pad. That's a lot of buttons, right? In addition to start and select, which are probably going to be used for menus, right? So if we think about this, we could probably map that to also keyboard keys and have, I think, probably just about everything we would need to be able to use, right? Because one thing that I don't want to have is like, let me pull it up. Let me pull up an example of what I'm talking about. It's actually kind of hard to find a non-custom one. I guess I can go with this one. How do I... There we go. This is a really low resolution image, but you can kind of get the idea, right? Actually, you know what? Let me see if I can find a better resolution than that. Because that one is just way too low resolution. If I could find one that's not filled with mods too, that'd be nice. I guess the point of it doesn't have to worry too much about that. Okay, so I guess let's look at... That's a really tiny image too. Jeez. Is there any... Let me see if I can find... Okay. Sure. I guess we can go with this one will work. All right. So if we take a look at this screenshot, right? And obviously this person has some mods installed, but the purpose is still there. What I want to avoid is this crap at the bottom, right? Just tons of icons on the screen over here on the right side too. I do not want to have a UI that's anywhere near this busy. I'm thinking probably, very, very, very minimal UI. And probably these things wouldn't even show up all the time unless you hit like a menu button or something to display what's what. Because there's really, if you have everything mapped to keys on the keyboard or buttons like this, once you figure out what the map, what's mapped to what, or have a way to look it up really quickly, I don't feel like you need to display that on the screen all times, right? And so I'm thinking like I want to avoid this kind of thing completely because this is just overwhelming, right? And it's just it's cluttered noise, and it keeps you from being able to see the world as it was intended. So the more I think about it, though, I don't really think we need all that much in terms of different maps, right? So I'm actually just we're gonna try doing this as a single control scheme. And see if we can't work something out that kind of works for any scenario, right? So I'm actually going to do this. So let's make this a little bit, you know what? Actually, a better form for this instead of a bullet point. Can we do does this have tables? Inserts, table. Let's see, we only need, let me see, 3. So we need the name of the thing that it does, and then what the bindings are, right? So we'll just basically build a binding table. Let's go with 12, right? So I figure maybe if we build out a binding table, like a keybind table, maybe that will be a good start. So we have so player movement, right? Actually, hold on a second. So action, key mapping, gamepad mapping. So we're going to have player movement. This is just going to be WASD, right? I don't need to define those separately. That'd be kind of dumb. Left joystick, right? And then we have player rotation. And I guess for rotation, we could use QE, right? So to rotate left or right, or mouse position, right? And then on the gamepad, it'll just be the right joystick. We also have the ability to click the joysticks too, so that's another thing, right? We can maybe use that to pull up a menu or something. Agree, cluttered UI is terrible. Yeah. Just trying to provide thought bubbles. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I think for a lot of games, having the key map switch makes sense, but I'm going to say let's try to avoid doing that, right? I feel like the lowest barrier to entry that we can have to a player just jumping in and playing the game, the better, right? So we want a consistent control scheme across everything. Like the left joystick is always going to move the player in some way, no matter what you're doing. Right is always going to be for camera control, right? That kind of thing. what are some of the other things that we can do? So when we think about basic actions, I guess we have interact, right? And this is context sensitive, right? So interact is going to be I'm tempted to put enter, but I think I'm going to go with F, right? Because that's right next to the WASD. And then on the gamepad, it's going to be A/X for a PlayStation controller, right? So A for Xbox, X for PlayStation controller. And then we're gonna have a couple of other things that we're gonna need to do in terms of your basic kind of combat type stuff. So let's say melee attack, right? Melee attack is always going to be bound to, let's see, what would be a good key? And I mean, we should make these all configurable, right? These are just default keybinds, right? So you can always change it if you want to. So melee attack for keyboard, do we do... I feel like X would be kind of awkward, right? If you want to move and do that at the same time. So like maybe space. I'm not sure. But then for 360 controller, it's going to be X. And then for PlayStation, it's going to be square, right? Let's do Xbox, PlayStation. So we have melee attack. We're always going to want to be able to do melee attack, right? And then we can have probably... We might want to have some sort of like dodge control or something like that, or the ability to dodge, which might be... It might be a combination of keys, but I'm always not a huge fan of doing that because I can get kind of... Well, I guess it kind of makes sense, right? So like you could have... like if we have a dodge roll, right? Maybe you could do shift plus WASD, or left joystick down, or I guess left joystick plus Y, right? Which on the PlayStation is going to be triangle, right? So if you... On PC, if you hit shift and you do WASD, you're going to roll in the direction that you're hitting shift, right? So forward, left, backward, right. And then the same thing will be true if you are using a controller and you move the joystick and then press Y. That'll be like a roll, right? And then maybe we also have block, which would wind up being, maybe we do R for that, right? And on this, it'll wind up being B, or on the PlayStation controller, it'll be circle, right? And so those will kind of be the basic, melee attack / basic movement controls. And then if we have, we also have these other, like the bumper buttons up here, and other stuff as well. So we can use, what did they call these again? Left button and right button. So maybe we have spell 1, right? Or spell / ranged 1, right? And that's going to wind up being the 1 on the upper row of keys on the keyboard. And then we'll do left button for that, / L1 on the PlayStation. And then spell ranged 2. We'll do 2. And then, let's see, should we have it do, should we make the default left button and then right button, or left button, left trigger? I feel like the triggers should be used for like special things. Let's do right button / R1, right? And then we can have special / charge attacks, right? Which is something we haven't really talked about. And that's going to be hold 3, right? Or left trigger / L2 on the PlayStation. And that's going to be special charge 1 and special charge 2. Hold 4. I'm not sold on this yet, but I'm kind of brainstorming, right? So we have right trigger / right 2. And then, we can add a few things after this as well. Like we could do maybe a spell menu, right? And the spell menu on keyboard would be maybe like Z or something. And maybe on the controller it would be what do they call this on? I don't know what they actually call this when you press on the joystick on the Xbox controller. I don't remember what they actually call that. I know it's R3 on the PlayStation, or L3 and R3. Is it maybe RS or LS / L3? I don't know what that means. So like maybe we press that to bring up the spell menu, and then you would also use that same joystick to navigate it. Click thumbstick? Yeah, I can't remember what the heck they call it. What do they... Xbox controller, thumbstick, click. Is it actually called L3 too, as well? Let me see, Xbox. I should specify 360 controller, I guess. Here we go. Okay, so here's something. 4th axis, 5th axis. They call them axes? Yeah, I know these are axes, but... let bumpers, not buttons. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But I don't remember... No, I don't need the actual binding. I need... what the heck the thing is actually called. Push joystick in. I don't know that there's like a standard name for it. Stick button is what this calls it. Stick button. So I guess I could just call it left stick button and right stick button. Yeah, most people get it if you use click or push. Yeah, so I guess I could do left stick, click. I guess that'll work. Okay, so actually, now that I'm thinking about it, this might be a scenario where we want to actually split to a different set of controls temporarily, right? Where we would temporarily, contextually, let's see, inserts, row below. Navigate, spell, menu, only when open, right? And so this would be left stick as well. And so like maybe you click the left stick to activate it, you go into this mode, and then only while that's open, the left stick is responsible for, you know, navigating you in the wheel menu that pops up. And to activate that on PC, it would probably just be right click. Would give you that. I don't know that's only going to be a spell menu. Maybe it's an interaction menu or a spell menu. Maybe we can combine the two. And it's always just some menu that comes up that gives you options. That the menu itself is contextual, context sensitive, but like the controls of it aren't. They always act the same way. Kind of. That's what I'm thinking. Just getting all your thoughts down for it. Exactly. I guess I don't need to focus on this too much, right? But I think if we do it this way, and maybe we can even have we could even have something like maybe the triggers put you into like a heavier damage mode of what you're trying to do. So like if you hold like left trigger and you press X to swing your sword, it's a more powerful attack or something. Actually, I like that a lot better. Actually. Let's change this one to control. Wait, control? What would be easy to use with WASD to dodge? Because I feel like shift, I mean, I guess shift works. But I'm thinking I need something for a power attack too. So like maybe that's control, but then having to hit control 1, 2, 3, or 4 is kind of awkward too. Maybe that's also shift. Right, so like, yeah, let's actually get rid of these for a second. Power attack, spell. So we'll do, I'm not sure what we're going to do here, but we do LT/L2 plus what would it be? I guess X. X/ square, etc. Right? So summon attack key. Attack, spell, I guess, right? So that would be this. Yeah, and so the mapping on here would be shift plus attack, spell. Right, so like if you're carrying a sword, if you hold the left trigger and then swing your sword, you're gonna like lean back and like maybe do a two-handed swipe or something like that, or like a power attack that's a little bit slower but deals a whole lot more damage. I like that, because that makes it feel a little bit better, I think. Just pushing the...
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Okay, I'm going to mute that thing. Every once in a while, my Alexa picks up on some of my speech, like I'm asking it a question. I don't understand what it's doing there. But anyway. So maybe we only allow 2 spells to be bound at once, right? And that'll provide a little bit of a challenge. We're not going to have a crazy amount of spells anyway. But maybe via this menu, you can set what you want to use, right? So if we only allow those, and then we have power attack spell, it just gives you a more powerful version of the attack or spell that you're casting. So if you're casting a fireball, it'll be a bigger fireball. If you're casting an ice bolt, it'll be a bigger ice bolt, that kind of thing. I don't know what to use the right trigger for, but we'll think about it. I'm just going to put question marks in here for right now, and we'll come back to it. But I'm thinking, like, if we stick with a control scheme that's relatively simple like this, where basically any interaction that we have to do with the scene is done by F or A/X, I think that will actually get us pretty far, right? So an interaction would be like opening a door or talking to an NPC, or opening a treasure chest, something like that, right? And then I guess it would also be let's also put a row below, and we'll do cancel interaction, right? Where relevant. And that will wind up being, let's see. We're going to want to map that to B or circle for this, right? And then I guess R, we could map R, I guess, to it as well. Or should we maybe just use escape for that? Maybe we just use escape on keyboard. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So when you're in interaction mode, per se, maybe some of these other things get disabled. So maybe we do have different key bindings, or different key maps that we push and pop and things like that. And so like when you're interacting with something, you might want to turn some of these on and off, or just not react to them in the middle of that. So I think that makes sense. We'll flesh that out once we actually start building those systems, I think. It won't be hard to change from one to the other. Okay, so I think that makes enough sense. Okay. Dylan R93, first time chatter. Hello, welcome. Hope you're doing well. So what do we want to look at next? So I guess that's controls for now. I'm pretty satisfied with that. Let's see. We talked a little bit about combat mechanics. Let's see. I don't know if we need to... Do we need to flesh that out anymore? So melee combat is swords, clubs, daggers, etc. Different damage areas, AoE, conal, etc. We did specify ability to have power attack. Power attack. Which is a slower but higher damage version of the melee attack. Okay, so magic. I guess let's talk about what spells we want, right? Like maybe we magic spells. All right, I'm gonna put, instead of magic, I'm gonna put arcane because that's what we've been putting everywhere else. And when we rename it, we'll go from there. Spells. So we're gonna have a couple things here. AoE and ranged. Okay, so let's also do ranged attacks. Ranged combat, I guess we'll say. All right, so we're gonna have fireball. Is gonna be 1, or I don't really want to call it major fireball. What's the power attack version of that? So if fireball is just kind of the regular version, and then we have another version that is bigger and more powerful and more concentrated, but it takes like a second to cast, right? I feel like there's another. All right, I'm just going to call it major fireball for now, or power fireball. And I'm going to put these around it to denote that we don't have a name for it. Is this tag targeting or more action combat? Action combat. Yeah, so I don't want to have like a target reticle and being able to click enemies and having it auto aim. No, I think the aim needs to be, because on PC you'll be able to aim with the mouse. You can aim with the keyboard. I'll have that as a backup, but why would you do that, right? And I feel like on the controller, the 2-axis system will make sense. So I feel like we don't really need the game to aim for you. I think that should be up to the player. What language is your engine written in? It is all written in C. 100% C. Minus some of the build scripts and stuff like that, but yeah, otherwise it's C. Which that too is something we're going to address at some point. We're gonna write our own build system in C instead of using Make. But yeah. So we have Ice Bolt, and maybe we have. Ooh, wait a minute! I have an idea. Actually, I have a better idea. What if, instead of having a power fireball, what if the alternate version was an AoE? Right, so you could just fire off a single fireball. Or the more powerful version of that is basically a channeled AoE. Maybe that's what we do, right? So fireball is going to be... maybe we do Firestorm. Right, so it's an AoE. And then Ice Bolt is going to be a Blizzard, right? Which is an AoE. Freeze / Ice Nova, right? Okay, so I kind of like that. I don't know how many different types of arcane spells I want to have. Of different types of elemental magic, right? But let's say fire. Let's say deals fire-based damage and applies a damage over time as well. And then here we'll say, let's do fire aspected damage, right? So we'll say deals ice aspected damage and has a chance to freeze enemy in place. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. I was checking Kohi's source code and it felt like reading a book. I really appreciate your writing style. I appreciate that. Thank you. First time chatter, by the way. Welcome. There are definitely places up in there that are still kind of a mess that I have to work on, for sure. But yeah, I've tried to be as neat as possible with it, with how much movement we've had in the code base since we started the project. But yeah, I'm glad you appreciate that. So actually, this I'm actually thinking let's eliminate. Let's just have one set, right? Per aspect, right? So we have regular / power version. So we have fire aspect, we have ice aspect, wind aspect, I guess would be the next one, right? So we have, let's do, I don't want to use a term like arrow, right? Because I feel like that's like overused. What could I call the wind attack? Like maybe wind buffet or something? Something like that, right? And then we have hurricane as the AoE, right? And we're going to say this deals wind aspected damage. And applies a dot as well. And then also, an additional, well, maybe instead of applying a dot, let's actually not do that. Let's say instead, and knocks enemies backward, right? So that's a knockback that we'll have for that. So every time you hit them with Wind Buffet, which is sort of the single target, and then Hurricane, which is going to be the multi-target or the AoE, it's going to knock them backwards from where you are. Backward from the player position, right? We'll be explicit about that. And that way we don't ever have to worry about what direction they're getting pushed in either. Thank you for the subscription over there on the YouTube side. I appreciate that. I was sick you're using a custom engine. I mean, we are using a custom engine, yeah. Unless I think you're referring to the actual tweet where I said my custom engine. Yeah, I did. Yep. I see what you did there. I think I'm going to call it a night here. Stream was fun. Hope to continue being things continue being productive. I appreciate that, Evelyn. I appreciate you being here and participating. Thank you. What about some conjuration summoning type spells? Yes, I agree with that for sure. I was just trying to get the simple ones out of the way first, but yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Would each spell have a single target versus AoE setting, or would alternate version of each spell be unique? So each one will have a regular / power version, and that can mean anything for the different types of spells. So for these basic element-based ones, that's going to mean the regular version is just a single target, and the power version is a AoE effect. And so that's the one that you would get by holding the trigger button and then firing off the same button. So I think there's going to be certain circumstances where, like for range combat, it's going to be a little bit differently. Well, actually, it's not going to be all that different. I'll go back to spells in a second, but I just thought of something. So we'll say range combat. So we're going to say bow and arrow. And we'll say the single version is going to just be steady shot, right? Slash, what do we want to put? Like arrow volley, or some sort of volley, right? Which would be the AoE. And this is going to be physical ranged damage. Right? I'll have to think of a better name for that. I'm just going to do this for now until I figure out what that is. But yeah, conjuration summoning spells would be interesting as well. And we probably have to place some rules around that as well. Because one thing that I don't want to have, that was constantly a problem in games like WoW and stuff, is where you wind up having a pet. I feel like that always winds up breaking. It's always a pain in the ass to figure out all the edge cases with it. And so I figure if we wind up doing something like a summon spell, it's going to be basically just a really, really strong set of attacks that happens all at once, right? And you essentially pause the enemy's combat and you play this sequence of animations and stuff and lots of pretty effects and all that. And then it just like repeatedly hits the enemies with like various types of damage depending on what you summon. And then it goes away. And then you have to like recharge something, right? So I think that I kind of feel like is kind of its own thing, right? It's outside of even arcane spells, right? So like, I had this already. So like, how did you word that? It was conjuration summoning. I don't know which one of those I like more. So I'm going to say conjure / summon, right? Right. And I'm not going to come up with specifics on this now because I don't necessarily know how I want to work as a mechanic, or where we'd definitely have to tie that into the story somehow. We don't have enough of the story fleshed out to really figure out that right now. But what I will say is, these are ultra powerful spells that can only be cast when certain criteria are met. These essentially pause the battle for the duration of the summon, play lots of effects, animations, and do various amounts of damage, sometimes aspected, sometimes not, depending on what is summoned. I think that makes sense, right? And then we'll just put a to-do in here. Summon types / names. And the reason I'm putting that as a to-do is because we have to make sure this is tightly tied to the lore and world. All right, you know what? I'm going to underline that too because that's a super important point. So like this is a mechanic that we could add. I feel like we could add this probably way down the line, right? We don't necessarily need to do that right away. That could be an extra thing that you get maybe pretty far along in the game. I like the idea. I just don't know how I want to implement it yet. For range combat, boomerang was another one that I had, right? So boomerang is going to be a little bit different, right? Because that's kind of AoE by default if you think about it, because it kind of flies out and goes in a circle and comes back, right? And so anything it hits in that circle has damage done to it. So standard version of this has the boomerang fly out in a circular pattern, damaging anything in its path before coming back. Let's actually do this. So the power version what does the power version do? Because we already have an AoE, right? So this is already effectively multi-target. Not quite AoE, I guess, but multi-target. So I don't know what the power version of this would be, if there even is one. Like what do you do? Just throw the boomerang a little bit harder? Like, it doesn't really make sense, right? Maybe it's like imbued with magic somehow. I'm not sure. All right. So let's think about one more thing, arcane spells that I can think of right off the top of my head is we need earth aspected, right? So we don't have that yet. So what do we want to say? Stone throw would be the single target version, and earthquake would be the AoE. Deals earth aspected damage and slows enemies movement speed. All right, so each one of these kind of have like different effects that they can potentially apply, right? So firestorm or fireball / firestorm applies a dot. Ice bolt blizzard can freeze the enemy in place. Wind buffet hurricane knocks them back, and then stone throw earthquake deals earth aspected damage and slows the enemy's movement speed for a short amount of time. Let's see. Multiple larger with added arcane aspected damage that fires in all directions or something for the boomerang idea. I was thinking about something like that, right? Because I guess a boomerang is kind of like, it kind of flies out in front of you and then goes around and comes back in front of you, right? So there's like almost like a teardrop shape that's in front of you that it's going to do damage within. And maybe that's actually how we calculate the AoE, actually. But do we have it go? So you're saying maybe multiples of those in all directions, maybe. Okay, let's put that. I don't know that I'm fully sold on it, but I'm going to write down the idea. Because it's not bad. Ideas I'm going to put for this. And I'm going to put this as to do. Thank you for the follow, by the way. Let's see. Multiple boomerangs fired on on cardinals from player. And when I say cardinals on player, I mean if you look at a compass, cardinals are the primary directions. So north, south, west, east, right? Intercardinals would be these 45-degree ones, right? So when I say cardinals, I mean this, north, south, east, west. When I say intercardinals, I mean, northwest, southwest, southeast, northeast. So if we fire multiple boomerangs on the cardinals from the player, then essentially we'll have that teardrop shape, but in 4 directions. I think that makes sense. That would be the power move, right? Could have the arcane type vary based on player decision. So we could add, you're saying like maybe add an aspect to it? So that is actually something we haven't discussed yet. And something that I think we should absolutely add. Not directly like you're saying as part of the actual move itself, but let's see. Let's do, I guess we could do this under crafting. Or at least adjacent to crafting. Item enhancements / enchantments, right? Which is another thing. So these are ways to add special properties to a weapon. And maybe even that weapon has to meet certain criteria to be enchanted. And enchantments cost resources of some kind. Items, probably. And so when I say enchantments, we could have like a fire aspect enchantment, right? And I'm probably going to do this because I don't like that name. So we can say, maybe this enchantment adds fire aspected damage to a melee. I guess to a weapon in general, right? This occasionally applies a dot to the enemy when hit. Time limited enchantment. You think it'd be cool to have a time limited enchantment, kind of like when Witcher drinks a potion, they only get the enhancements for a short duration. I don't hate that idea actually, because enchantments could be overpowered if abused, right? So like they do cost some sort of item. Enchantments also only last for a certain amount of time. Varies by enchantment, right? So like maybe the first enchantments that you get in the game only last like, I don't know, 2-3 minutes, something like that. And the only time you'd want to use it early on in the game is like fighting a boss, when you need that extra little hit of damage just to sort of push you over the edge, right? You like have enchanted water or something that you pour onto your sword for water damage. Yeah, exactly. So it'd be some sort of item, or maybe even a collection of items, and it could vary by the enchantment too. So like we could determine like what items it needs and stuff after that. At this point, I'm mainly just thinking, different mechanics, right? So like, oh my God, my brain. My brain was just like, yeah, you could just, take your sword and fart on it and have wind damage, right? That might actually be a funny joke to put in there somewhere. Have to eat something really spicy and then fart on the sword, and then it gives wind damage too. So we'll do, I'm just going to kind of type these in for now. Earth, aspect, enchantment. Wind and fire damage, that's nasty but funny. Yeah, exactly. Valhalla Ovsky, thank you so much for the Prime subscription. I really appreciate the support there. Thank you very much. That means a lot. With a 50% chance of burning yourself. Oh, that's epic. But that means I have to put like Taco Bell into the game somehow. How am I going to do that? That is funny to think about, though. So we have, let's see, what's the one I'm missing? Ice. And then we can also have other types of enhancements too. Or I typed in enhancement, I meant enchantment. So we could have like a regen enchantment, right? Heals the player for a bit of health for the, I guess like occasionally for the duration of the enchantment. I can't type tonight either. You helped me out a lot with your YouTube channel, improving my TypeScript skills and creating a game engine. Awesome. Oh, you're following the TypeScript videos. That's old stuff now, but yeah, I'm glad it's useful to you. I do mean to circle back to that one of these days. I just don't know when, because I'm so busy with this current project that we're working on. But yeah, I really appreciate that support. Thank you. If you do that, it has 0.2% of adding poison damages. Yeah, right. That might be a risk of eating food in general, right? So like maybe we have enchantments that are, help you regen health. I suppose we could also have arcane spells that do that, right? So maybe we have like a heal, where we have a heal and then a heal over time. And we'll say heals the player / heals over time, right? So the regular would just be a quick heal. So if you just need a really fast one, that's cool. You can just cast that and be done with it. Or the power version of that would be a heal over time, but it takes a second to cast, right? Hello from Brazil. Awesome. Welcome. We love Brazilians here, for sure. We have quite a number of you guys in chat typically. So yeah, welcome. Okay. Oh, you know what? We are missing an element that I just thought of. There's one more element. So we want to have shock / do I want to say chain lightning? I feel like that's kind of used, abused, and overused. What would be a good... I guess chain lightning is what we would need, though. Thunder stomp. Yeah. The question is do we want it to be close range or do we want it to be a ranged thing, right? Actually, though, that's not a bad idea, right? So, like, thunder stomp, right? So that's going to be close range AoE. And so deals lightning aspected damage. Let's see. And power version has a chance to stun. Shockwave's another one. Could be a cone that ripples in a specific direction. Yeah. I kind of like Thunder Stomp, though, because that's like all around. Plasmomorph, high velocity ejection that incinerates at the molecular level. I feel like that's a tech thing, for sure. First time chatter, by the way, welcome. I do like it, though. It's dark, and I do like it. You know what I'm going to do? So there's actually a category of things that we haven't explored here. I guess that would technically be... I want to think about like tech weapons, right? Because we do have this place which is like super high tech, right? And they're going to have weapons that don't exist elsewhere. And so technically they do still fall under melee, right? Or ranged. They're not going to be arcane, but they would follow under melee or ranged. So like I guess under ranged, we could put... Why is it not doing the thing? Okay. Plasmomorph. I don't hate the name either. That's a pretty good name. I like that. Powered... actually, we'll say delivered from technology weapon. So you're saying high velocity, plasma ejection that incinerates at the molecular level. I really like that, actually. That's a really interesting idea for like a high-tech weapon, right? And that would also be believable as something that the tech people could use against like the super dark and dangerous forces in Duskvale to keep them at bay, to keep them from overtaking Umbrathar. I like that a lot. That's a really good suggestion. Thank you. Chronos time dilating demon familiar that retrochronologically defeats your adversaries in the past. Oh man, that'd be a super cool mechanic, but I feel like I'd have to rewrite half the game ideas to actually make that fit in. Plus, we're not doing pets, because I've decided that pets are always terrible and always a source of bugs, and I just don't want to deal with it. They're a lot of complication for a relatively little game. So we have Plasmomorph. That's going to be like the single target version, and I think the power version of that is going to be Plasma Storm, which would be an AoE. So basically be that whole same thing. And maybe plasma damage is an aspect of onto itself. World map looks too normal. Add some weird stuff. Yeah, it is a little bit too normal. So just as a real quick aside on that, actually. So this was generated using this Inkarnate program, which is actually pretty. It allowed me to put this together really fast, actually. And I know that it has. I'm using the free version right now. I think it has like a paid version, and I'm considering actually getting it. Because it gives you a whole lot more extra things like this. Like it's got stamps and stuff like that. It's got a whole catalog of assets. But there's all these other assets that you can't like mix and match them at this level with a free account, right? But like they do have like sci-fi battle maps and stuff like in there. But I was able to build that entire map with just this small set of assets. And they have all of these other things, and there's just I don't know if it's actually going to allow me to look at them even. Yeah, so it's like it's a monthly thing, but like it's a really good program. So I'm actually considering actually getting it. Don't see how it's better than Paint. I'll tell you how it's better than Paint because I can select this, and it has like things like convenience things is basically what it is, right? So it's like they have like 9 different mountain shapes in here. So like as I place the mountains, it randomly changes them, right? And the layering is pretty good. I'm gonna have to undo that because I don't want all that in the middle of my desert. But like it looks pretty good with relatively little effort. Yeah. Yeah, the illustrious rustic forests of Examined's chart zone B. Yeah, so names are definitely something we're gonna have to think of. I started mapping out the lore, started mapping out the all of the continents and all that stuff, but yeah, I definitely need to start coming up with names. I got to do some brainstorming tomorrow for like city names and stuff. So. Yeah, City B, City A, yeah. My grandmother lives in Zone B. They're going through a rough time right now. It's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I'm using this to just sort of rough this out. I'm probably not going to wind up keeping this. I probably will honestly wind up just drawing them by hand when it comes to make the final version of it. But this is pretty good, I have to say. And it's like $25 for an entire year to get all the other assets. So I'm considering doing it because they also allow you to use it commercially if you do that. So, tell Granny T Pose.sprite I said hello. That's hilarious. I know exactly what you're talking about too. A tech weapon that uses sound to confuse damage your enemy would be good. Ooh, that is good. That would be... I guess that would be kind of a ranged thing as well. So I guess we do... Sonic Bolt / Sonic Storm, which is an AoE. I guess this would technically be... It would technically be air aspected. Or wind aspected, I guess. Because technically you're... I'm just going to say unaspected damage. I mean, maybe wind. Maybe. Deals unaspected damage, maybe wind damage to enemies. Temporarily confusing them. I think that's a good idea. I like that one. Let's see. Honestly, the world would likely change 1,000 times before it ships. Yeah, and that's why I'm thinking, like, I really don't want to spend a whole lot of time drawing the map. Like, this was really quick to put together, which is why I'm thinking of sticking with this while I'm planning all this stuff out. And then when we go to make the final version, like once the actual world is all built and everything, then we'll see about doing it the long way. What you've built so far is solid, so it's a great reference. Yeah, so this just helps me kind of keep things in mind as I'm gonna write the story. And eventually we're gonna need zone-specific maps for all this stuff too. So like once I figure out the macro level of this, then it'll be time to zoom into the micro level of it and start, fleshing out the history of each zone and stuff like that. Okay, cool. So we actually made some pretty decent progress on this tonight, actually. I'm pretty happy with it. We definitely have some work to do. We do have, let's see. We still have these to do. We had some hots and dots. But as far as like curses and blessings or buffs and debuffs, we need to figure some of those out, how we want some of those to work. Els Dragoon. Dang it, you got me back this time. I knew it was gonna happen one of these days. Welcome. Shout out to Els Dragoon. If you guys don't know who they are a duo who are making a game in... Hang on one second, let me just finish typing this. Can't type and talk at the same time, I guess. They are making a game in 6502 assembly on the NES. So if you find that interesting, which I think you should, everybody should toss them a follow right now, because they got some Giga Chad stuff going on over there on their channel, and those guys are awesome. So definitely give them a follow. Got 'em. Revenge Raid. Yep. Huzzah. Love it. So we're actually not doing programming tonight. We're world building and coming up with ideas for the game that we're going to be building. Thank you guys for the follows. I appreciate that. And thank you for the Hydrate Redeem. So I'll just give a quick intro to what we're doing. Are you wanting to keep this all in your Word docs? Or are you thinking about using something like Atlassian, Confluence, Jira for maintaining your documentation? This document is not going to be used long term. This is just so that I can brainstorm ideas. I, generally speaking, don't believe in maintaining a game document, especially for a project that really I'm the only one working on, right? I have it all up here. Did you see Incarnate open? Yes, you do. Yes. So before I show you that, I will first jump to the top here. This is a brainstorming document. This is by no means an organized game design document, right? But what we're going to be making is a top-down 3D isometric, but perspective action RPG, right? And I've obviously got to fix that to make that a little bit less of a mouthful in terms of description. But we don't have a game for it, or a name for the game yet. We don't have a name for a lot of things, so everything in this document that's got brackets around it is still needing to be named. But we were building out a world setting, a little bit of lore, a little bit of history, different races and their history, the different continents, the cities, the towns. And then we were also building, where is it? Obviously oceans are in here as well. And then we have various religions that the different sects of those races and regions believe in, as well as something called arcane, which is basically the underlying ability to channel energies from life forces within the world. And these groups all know the arcane as something different, and they channel it differently. But it's underlying, it's all the same thing. And they've caused wars over disagreements on this, and things of that nature. So I started, kind of mapping this out, and I just banged this together before stream really quickly today. So you'll see that there's a lot of unnamed stuff here. I've got to come up with names for a lot of this, but This is what the world kind of is looking like at the moment in terms of how I've got it mapped out. So we've got 3 major continents. We have 3 oceans. Again, a lot of this stuff isn't named, right? So we've got the humans that are primarily in City A, the trolls that are primarily in City B, the dwarves that are primarily in City C, which is an underground city, so you can't really see it from here. And then we have the sort of far eastern humans that are in City D, and so this is like a high technology type of city, right? And so we've got other smaller towns peppered throughout this. Like we've got northern humans, which are sort of like Vikings or barbarians or something like that, and they kind of keep to themselves and they live up here in the snowy area. We've got this Dusk Vale here, which is basically the fallout from a civil war that happened here. There used to be the human capital city of Dawnvale used to be here. It got destroyed and is now Dusk Vale. And so the survivors of this were told that the trolls from this city down here had something to do with a lot of the humans getting killed up here. And so in believing that, they said, well, our stuff is destroyed now. We're going to come down here and we're going to take what is City A. This used to be a troll city. And the humans attacked it and razed the city, and then built their own city on top of it and said, ha, it's ours now. And then, the trolls are like, what the heck are you talking about? Why'd you attack our city? And so they counterattacked them in a different war. And so that war is still ongoing. But the difference is the whole thing is that the humans were told that the trolls were involved in a mass, essentially genocide that happened up here. But the trolls were not actually involved. That was a troll within the government here, trying to overthrow the government of this city so that he could tip the balance of power in his favor and take over. And so he was trying to get the humans to attack them, which he did successfully, and they lost this city here. And so the trolls and the government, except for the guy that subterfuged them, had no idea why the humans attacked. So now they hate each other, and they don't really know why. So yeah, that's just kind of some of the stuff that we've built out. We've built out descriptions of the various zones and stuff like that. And we're just kind of talking about abilities, control schemes, all of that stuff before we get into the development, because we're trying to figure out through all of the wanted world mechanics, the combat mechanics that we need, which we've got a lot of that spec'd out now. Between all this stuff, what engine features do we need to add? And so it's a relatively short list. We didn't have an animation system because the initial game I had planned didn't need one, but this one does, so I'll have to add that. We need billboards, a particle system, blended materials for the terrain. The terrains already exist. We just need blended materials to make them look right. Point light shadows, an outline effect, like a cartoon outline effect, aka Borderlands style, right? Emissive bloom, we have like 70% of the way there. We just have to add some stuff. Localization, day-night cycles, and gamepad support. So most of these features are not too big of a deal. The biggest one's going to be this animation system, but I'm not really too worried about that one either. So we need to add, we're basically building out this document to figure out what we need to add to the engine, and then how we want to start structuring our gameplay systems. So I hope that makes sense. I know that was a huge information dump for you guys, but I hope that makes sense. Let me catch up on chat, because it looks like I'm pretty behind. GigaChat potential NPC encounter. Offers jawline sharpening, persistent speech, and fortune buff. There's a lot of good doc stuff out there. I'm a DevOps guy. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there is lots of stuff. But like for a team of one, it tends to be overkill. So like OG Final Fantasy Tactics, parts of it, yeah. It's inspired by parts of that, yes. World building is the funnest part, for sure. Let's see. I agree with you about not having a game design document when working alone. I think it limits creativity and experimentation. Exactly. Yep. I'm gonna basically keep this for like notes to myself if I need a reminder as to like the general direction I was going on something, but it's not going to be like a living, breathing document. If you need to do diagramming, look into Mermaid.js. It's super powerful. Oh, that's good to know. City D, I know it well. Yeah. I need many names. That's the next thing. Like, I came up with these two names, right? But like, I need to come up with names for all the rest of this stuff. And the names here match the write up of all of the descriptions in here. Right? So it's basically just gonna be a find and replace when I have names. It's more process documentation. Right now it's just markdown stored in a database, but it integrates into job tracking system. Okay. Let's see. Have you ever heard of an actual tabletop RPG called Microscope? It's like an RPG you play to develop a world. Super awesome and useful as a fun way to build a world. I feel like that rings a bell. Let me look it up. I vaguely remember hearing about this a long time. Yeah, it has been out a while. Okay. I vaguely remember hearing about this. I'll have to look into maybe acquiring a copy of that. It's a good suggestion. Let's see. My BA was in religion. I find it interesting that you expressly include it in your world building. Are you a fan of Artifexian on YouTube? I'm not familiar with that, but I will pull it up and have a look. Yeah, so part of the religion aspect of it is they use that as a explanation for the magical powers that they have, and there's 3 different religions that all have different perspectives on where magic comes from and how magic is invoked. And then there's 2 different versions of magic outside of religion that are secular slash agnostic. Names are hard. Language stuff sort of happens first. Exactly. Yep. That's where I'm at right now. And by the way, I slammed this together like right before the stream. This is not even an hour's worth of work. This and about half of this document was written in about an hour and a half. So, plus what we did here on stream tonight. I should say where we started on stream tonight. That's how much work that was. Microscope is a cool tool if you want collaborators, but also want to preserve certain aspects and truths of your world building without having to defend them and say no all the time. Fair enough. Okay, I'll have to look at that. Artifexian is a great channel for world building, discusses things like how to adjust industry based on what the terrain looks like, for example. Ooh, that's good. Tons of linguistic stuff. Oh, that sounds really good. I'm going to need that kind of stuff. Cool. All right. So, unfortunately, though, I do have to get up in the morning for work, which means that I have to end the stream now. So, Els Dragoon beat me to it this time around. I'll get you guys next time, for sure. Let's see. Legend over here fixing his game engine, but also does all this in a couple of hours. Bet. Yeah, so we're definitely gonna continue on this. I'm gonna do a little bit of research into putting in an animation system. I'll try and work on that over the weekend and see how far I get. And if not, we'll probably visit that in the next stream. I am going to find somebody to raid, though, because unfortunately I have to end. Let me see if I can find somebody doing something relatively similar. It's sometimes a little bit hard to find something this time of night, so bear with me here a moment. Might be a little harder than I thought. All right. Actually, let's check out Hypnotic Games because it looks like he's doing ability details. So let's see what that's all about. Sounds like he's building abilities for the game he's working on. So let's go and check out his stream. And I'll leave you guys in his capable hands. And I will catch you guys on the next stream. Thank you so much for being here. If you have not already, I would greatly appreciate a follow. It helps me grow the channel. And my whole purpose of this entire series and thus the channel is to encourage people to write their own tech, so that we have more competition out there for game engines and the like. And now we're using our own game engine to make a game. So it is possible. It is a lot of work, but I'm hoping to inspire more people. So spread the word. I would greatly appreciate it. And I will see you guys on the next one. See ya.